The truth doesn't always arrive with a warning. Sometimes, it begins with the sound of a single glass hitting the floor. The sharp crash echoed through the dining room of Willow and Stone, one of Seattle's most popular upscale restaurants. Conversation stopped. Forks paused halfway to mouths. For one brief moment, every eye turned toward the kitchen entrance. Emily Carter froze beside table 14, her heart dropping into her stomach. She hadn't dropped the glass. In fact, she hadn't touched it. But somehow, she already knew she would be blamed. The lunch crowd was at its peak. The smell of grilled salmon, garlic butter, and fresh bread filled the air. Waiters moved quickly between tables. The hostess struggled to keep up with a line of customers waiting near the front entrance. It was the kind of controlled chaos Emily had learned to survive every day. At 28 years old, she could balance 3 dinner plates on one arm, memorize 20 orders at a time, and smile through 12-hour shifts even when her feet felt like they were on fire. But today was different. Her phone vibrated inside her apron pocket for the 3rd time in less than 10 minutes. She didn't need to look at the screen to know who it was. Lincoln Elementary, Noah's school. Her 6-year-old son had woken up with a cough that morning. She had almost called out from work. Almost. But rent was due in 5 days. The electric bill was already late. And missing a shift wasn't a luxury she could afford. Emily forced herself to keep moving. She delivered a basket of bread to a couple near the window and offered a polite smile. The woman smiled back. The man barely looked up from his phone. Another vibration buzzed against her hip. This time she glanced down. The voicemail notification made her chest tighten. Something was wrong. She knew it. Mothers always knew. Before she could listen to the message, a voice thundered across the restaurant. Emily. Kitchen. Now. Every muscle in her body stiffened. Kyle Peterson stood near the swinging kitchen doors. His expression was hard. His jaw clenched. Several employees immediately lowered their eyes and pretended not to notice. Nobody wanted to become the target of Kyle's frustration. Emily swallowed. Can it wait 5 minutes? I need to call my son's school. Kyle's face darkened. Kitchen. Now. The room seemed quieter somehow. Not silent. Just heavy. Like everyone was waiting to see what happened next. Emily looked around. No one spoke. No one intervened. She took a slow breath and followed him. Near the back corner of the dining room, a man sitting alone at a table looked up from his coffee. Unlike the other customers, he didn't return to his meal. He watched. Calmly. Carefully. His dark jacket looked ordinary enough. Nothing flashy. Nothing expensive at first glance. The server assigned to his section knew only that he had arrived without a reservation and requested a quiet table. She had no idea who he was. Neither did anyone else. The man's eyes followed Emily as she disappeared through the kitchen doors. Inside, the atmosphere changed instantly. The warmth of the dining room vanished. Stainless steel counters reflected the bright overhead lights. Orders were shouted across the line. Pans hissed. Dishwashers rattled. The smell of onions and roasted vegetables filled the air. Kyle stopped near the prep station and turned around. Do you have any idea how much money disappeared from table 8? Emily blinked. What? Don't play dumb. Several cooks exchanged uneasy glances. Emily looked from one face to another. Nobody met her eyes. I honestly have no idea what you're talking about, she said quietly. Kyle laughed once. A cold sound. Funny. Because the envelope vanished during your section. Emily stared at him. Her pulse quickened. What envelope? The one containing cash from a private client. For a moment, confusion overwhelmed her fear. She had never even seen an envelope. Another vibration came from her phone. Noah. The school. The thought cut through everything else. Kyle, please. My son is sick. I need 2 minutes to make a phone call. But before she could reach for her phone, a second crash echoed somewhere deeper in the kitchen. Several heads turned. And for the first time, Emily noticed something strange. People weren't looking at her anymore. They were looking behind her. Toward the small security monitor mounted near the manager's office. Toward a screen that had suddenly flickered to life. And somewhere beyond the kitchen walls, the quiet man in the dining room continued to watch every second unfold. The monitor flickered once, then twice, before settling into a grainy live feed from the dining room. Every employee in the kitchen seemed to stop breathing at the same time. Emily turned toward the screen, confused. Kyle's expression shifted for a fraction of a second. It was so brief most people would have missed it. But Emily saw it. The confidence in his eyes faltered. Then it vanished behind a practiced frown. Get back to work, he barked at the staff. Nobody moved. The kitchen suddenly felt smaller, hotter. The hum of refrigeration units and the hiss of cooking burners filled the silence that nobody wanted to break. Emily's phone vibrated again. This time the sound felt impossibly loud. Her hands trembled as she reached into her apron. Before she could answer, Kyle stepped forward. You can deal with personal calls after we figure out where the money went. Emily stared at him in disbelief. My son is 6 years old. The school has called 4 times. And this restaurant has customers who trust us. I did not take anything. Her voice remained calm, but her chest felt tight. She could almost hear Noah's cough from that morning. Could almost see the pale look on his face as she had tucked his jacket around his shoulders before school. A young line cook named Marcus shifted uncomfortably beside the prep station. Maybe we should let her answer the call, he said quietly. Kyle shot him a look that immediately silenced him. Emily lowered her gaze for a moment. Not because she felt guilty, because she was exhausted. There was a difference. The kind of exhaustion that came from years of carrying everything alone. The kind that settled into your bones and never fully left. 3 years earlier, she had imagined a different future. A small house, weekend soccer games, family dinners. Instead, life had become a constant calculation. Every dollar, every hour, every emergency. She looked up again. Please. Just one word. Not begging. Not pleading. Simply asking for basic human understanding. Kyle folded his arms. The envelope contained $5,000. Several employees exchanged shocked glances. Emily felt her stomach sink. $5,000 might as well have been $5 million. She had never held that much cash in her life. I have never even seen this envelope, she said. Then maybe you can explain something. Kyle reached toward a nearby counter and lifted a small white envelope. Emily immediately recognized it. Or rather, she recognized the restaurant logo printed on the corner. What she did not recognize was why everyone was staring at it. Kyle opened the flap and pulled out several stacks of bills. The room became even quieter. This was found in your locker. The words hit her harder than any accusation so far. What? My assistant checked employee lockers after the report came in. Emily shook her head. No, that is impossible. Is it? For the first time, uncertainty crept into the faces around her. Not because they believed Kyle completely, but because physical evidence was difficult to ignore. Emily felt heat rush into her face. I have not been near my locker since this morning. Convenient. Because I have been working. Her voice cracked slightly. Not from fear. From frustration. Another vibration buzzed from her phone. Then another. Finally, Emily looked down and saw a text notification from the school nurse. Her heart nearly stopped. Please call immediately. Noah's fever is now 103.4 degrees. The message blurred for a moment as tears threatened to form. She blinked them away. She could not afford to fall apart. Not here. Not now. My son needs me. Kyle's expression remained cold. And this restaurant needs answers. Near the kitchen entrance, the door swung open. One of the servers stepped inside carrying an empty coffee tray. The gentleman at table 20 wants another refill. Nobody paid attention. Nobody except the server. Because the customer at table 20 had been sitting there for nearly 40 minutes with the same untouched cup of coffee. Watching, listening, asking quiet questions, observing details others ignored. Outside the kitchen, Ethan Brooks sat back in his chair and looked toward the closed doors. The manager's report had not added up. The employee reactions had not added up. And now neither did the envelope. He glanced down at a note he had written minutes earlier. For simple words circled twice in black ink. Find out who benefits. Emily felt every pair of eyes in the kitchen settle on her. Some carried doubt. Some carried sympathy. Most carried uncertainty. That was the worst part. 10 minutes earlier, many of these people had laughed with her during lunch prep. Now they were looking at her as if they were seeing a stranger. The envelope sat on the stainless steel counter between her and Kyle like a silent accusation. Emily forced herself to breathe. Panic would not help Noah. Panic would not prove her innocence. Panic would only give Kyle exactly what he seemed to want. Open my locker again, she said quietly. Kyle raised an eyebrow. Why? Because if somebody put that envelope there, there might be something else. A few employees exchanged glances. Marcus looked thoughtful. Another server, named Jenna, shifted closer. She has a point, Jenna said. Kyle's jaw tightened. I think we have already found what we needed. Emily stared directly at him. Then why are you afraid to look again? The question hung in the air. Kyle opened his mouth, then closed it. Before he could respond, the kitchen door swung open once more. The hostess stepped inside, holding a cordless phone. "Emily," she said nervously. "The school nurse is on the line. She says it is urgent." Relief washed through Emily so suddenly that her knees nearly weakened. She reached for the phone immediately. "Thank you." Kyle stepped forward. "This conversation is not over." Emily did not answer him. For the first time all afternoon, nothing mattered except hearing Noah's condition. She pressed the phone against her ear. "This is Emily Carter." The nurse's voice came through immediately. "Miss Carter, Noah's fever has continued climbing. We recommend having him evaluated today. He is resting right now, but he keeps asking for you." Emily closed her eyes. The words struck deeper than any accusation. "He keeps asking for you. I am coming," she whispered. "As fast as I can." After ending the call, she stood motionless for several seconds. The noise of the kitchen returned around her. Pots clanged. Timers beeped. Orders were called out. Life moved forward while hers seemed frozen in place. "I need to leave," she said. "Absolutely not," Kyle replied. "Not until this investigation is finished." Emily looked at him. Really looked at him. Something felt wrong. Not simply unfair. Wrong. She had worked at Willow and Stone for nearly 2 years. She knew how Kyle handled mistakes. Usually he was impatient. Sometimes rude. But this felt different. Personal. As though he had already decided the outcome before asking a single question. Meanwhile, outside in the dining room, Ethan Brooks folded his notebook closed. He had spent the last 20 minutes listening carefully to conversations among the staff. People revealed surprising truths when they believed nobody important was paying attention. One busser had described Emily as the employee who always covered shifts for coworkers. Another server mentioned how Emily often skipped breaks so younger staff members could leave early. Even the dishwasher, a quiet man who rarely spoke, had described her as the nicest person in the building. None of it matched the picture Kyle was trying to paint. Ethan stood and walked slowly toward the hallway leading to the restrooms. On the surface, it looked like an ordinary stroll. In reality, it allowed him to pass near the employee lockers. He paused briefly beside the security office. Through the partially open door, he noticed something interesting. A maintenance request form sat on the desk. The timestamp caught his attention immediately. Security cameras covering the employee hallway had experienced a temporary outage earlier that morning, exactly during the period when the envelope could have appeared. Ethan's expression remained calm. But mentally, another piece clicked into place. Back in the kitchen, Emily removed her apron and folded it carefully. Not because she was giving up, because she was done arguing. "My son needs medical attention," she said. "If you want to fire me, then fire me. If you want to call the police, call them. But I am leaving to be with my child." The room fell silent again. Nobody expected that response. No tears. No shouting. No desperate pleas. Just quiet certainty. For a moment, even Kyle seemed unsure how to respond. Emily picked up her purse. As she turned toward the exit, she noticed several coworkers watching her. Marcus gave a small nod. Jenna offered a faint, encouraging smile. Tiny gestures. But they mattered. Because when everything else was being taken away, they reminded her of one thing. Not everyone believed she was guilty. And somewhere beyond the kitchen walls, a billionaire who had not yet revealed his name was beginning to suspect that the wrong person was standing accused. Rain tapped softly against the windshield as Emily pulled into the parking lot of Mercy Children's Clinic 20 minutes later. The gray afternoon sky matched the weight pressing against her chest. She parked between a pickup truck and a faded blue sedan, then hurried inside, clutching her purse against her side. The familiar scent of disinfectant and coffee greeted her the moment the automatic doors opened. Parents filled the waiting area. Some rocked sleepy toddlers. Others stared at their phones with worried expressions. Emily spotted Noah immediately. He sat curled beneath a small fleece blanket beside the school nurse, his blonde hair damp from fever. The moment he saw her, his tired face brightened. "Mom." The single word nearly broke her heart. She crossed the room quickly and knelt beside him. His forehead felt warm beneath her hand. Too warm. "Hey, buddy." Noah leaned against her shoulder. "I knew you would come." Emily swallowed hard. "Of course I came." The nurse offered a reassuring smile. "His temperature has come down a little since we arrived, but the doctor still wants to evaluate him." Emily thanked her and settled into a chair beside Noah. For the first time all day, She allowed herself to exhale. Whatever happened at the restaurant could wait. This could not. Across town, Ethan Brooks sat in his car outside Willow and Stone, reviewing notes on his tablet. He had planned to spend the afternoon conducting a routine anonymous inspection. Instead, he found himself reading employee records. Emily Carter's file was surprisingly thin. No disciplinary history. No customer complaints. Consistently positive performance reviews. Several commendations from guests. Nothing about it fit the story Kyle was pushing. Ethan tapped another report. Payroll records. Attendance logs. Shift schedules. One detail immediately stood out. Emily had covered 12 extra shifts over the past 2 months. Most had originally belonged to employees who reported directly to Kyle. Interesting. Meanwhile, back at the restaurant, rumors spread faster than lunch orders. Employees gathered in small groups whenever Kyle disappeared from sight. Marcus loaded dishes into a rack while Jenna dried glasses nearby. Something feels off, Jenna whispered. Marcus nodded. You noticed it too? Kyle never checked any other locker. Marcus stopped what he was doing. Exactly. Neither of them realized someone standing nearby overheard every word. An elderly dishwasher named Frank quietly continued his work, but his eyes narrowed thoughtfully. He had worked in restaurants for nearly 30 years, long enough to recognize when a story had holes. At the clinic, Noah rested his head against Emily's arm while cartoons played silently on a television mounted near the ceiling. Did you get in trouble at work? He asked suddenly. Emily looked down. Children always sensed more than adults realized. Why would you ask that? Noah shrugged weakly. You look worried. Emily forced a smile. Grown-up stuff. Will we be okay? The question hit harder than any accusation Kyle had made. She brushed a strand of hair from Noah's forehead. Yes. Noah studied her face. Promise. Emily hesitated only a second. I promise. She hoped it was true. Several hours earlier she had a job. Now she was not sure. Several hours earlier her biggest concern had been paying bills. Now she faced the possibility of losing everything she had worked for. Yet somehow, sitting beside her son, the fear felt smaller. Not gone. Just manageable. Because Noah reminded her why she kept fighting. Back at Willow and Stone, Frank finally approached Marcus after finishing his shift. The older man lowered his voice. You remember that camera outage this morning? Marcus frowned. Yeah. Frank glanced around to make sure nobody was listening. Funny thing, I was taking out trash around 9:15. And Kyle was standing near the employee lockers. Marcus stared at him. Alone. Frank nodded slowly. Completely alone. Neither man noticed the black SUV parked across the street. Inside, Ethan Brooks looked up from another report as a new message arrived from his private investigator. The subject line contained only 6 words. Background check complete. Concerning findings attached. The clinic visit lasted nearly 2 hours. By the time Emily and Noah stepped back into the cool evening air, the parking lot lights had already flickered on. The doctor believed the fever came from a severe respiratory infection, but thankfully, it had been caught early. Noah would need medication, rest, and several days away from school. Under normal circumstances, the news would have brought relief. Tonight, it brought another problem. Emily sat behind the wheel of her aging Honda and stared at the prescription receipt in her hand. Between the clinic copay, medication costs, rent due next week, and the possibility that she had just lost her job, the numbers no longer seemed to fit together. Noah leaned against the passenger seat with a blanket wrapped around his shoulders. Are we going home? He asked softly. Emily smiled. Yes, buddy. He nodded and closed his eyes. Within minutes, he was asleep. The city lights blurred through the windshield as Emily drove through downtown Seattle. She tried not to think about tomorrow. Tried not to imagine explaining unemployment to her landlord. Tried not to calculate how many weeks of groceries remained in her checking account. But worry had a way of finding every quiet moment. Across town, Ethan Brooks sat alone inside his office overlooking Elliott Bay. The skyline glittered beyond the glass walls, but he barely noticed. His attention remained fixed on the report spread across his desk. The investigation had uncovered several unusual details about Kyle Peterson. Nothing criminal, nothing dramatic, yet, but enough to raise questions. 3 former employees from different restaurants had filed complaints about unfair treatment. 2 mentioned intimidation. 1 specifically described being blamed for mistakes she did not make. Ethan leaned back in his chair. He had built his restaurant group on one principle: respect people first. Everything else came second. Somewhere along the way, someone inside Willow and Stone had forgotten that. His phone buzzed. Another message from his investigator. Attached were copies of security maintenance logs. Ethan opened the file immediately. The camera outage near the employee lockers had lasted exactly 18 minutes. During those 18 minutes, only 3 people had accessed the hallway. One of them was Kyle Peterson. Ethan stared at the screen. Then he picked up the phone. "Continue digging," he said. "I want everything." Meanwhile, at the restaurant, Frank sat in a booth finishing a cup of coffee after his shift. Marcus slid into the seat across from him. Neither spoke for several seconds. Finally, Marcus sighed. "You really saw him?" Frank nodded. 9:15 this morning. Near the lockers. Right. Marcus rubbed his forehead. Then why would he accuse Emily? Frank looked out the window. Sometimes the question is not who benefits from a lie. Marcus frowned. Then what is the question? Frank's expression darkened slightly. What was someone trying to hide? Back at her apartment, Emily carried Noah upstairs after he fell asleep in the car. The old building creaked beneath her footsteps. Paint peeled from the hallway walls. The heating system rattled every winter. But it was home. She tucked Noah into bed, placed the medicine on the nightstand, and quietly turned off the lamp. Then she sat alone at the small kitchen table. Bills lay scattered beside an unpaid electric statement. Her employee schedule rested beneath them. Tomorrow's shift started at 10 in the morning. Or at least it had. Emily stared at the paper. Her phone remained silent. No termination email. No call from management. Nothing. The uncertainty felt almost worse. She lowered her head into her hands. For the first time all day, tears threatened to surface. Not because of the accusation. Not because of the money. Because she was tired. So incredibly tired. Yet even then, she refused to give up. After several minutes she straightened, opened her laptop, and began updating her resume. If one door closed, she would find another. She always had. Unknown to her, a black SUV rolled slowly past her apartment building at that exact moment. Ethan Brooks glanced toward the aging complex before continuing down the street. The address from her employee file matched reality perfectly. No luxury car. No hidden wealth. No signs of someone who had stolen thousands of dollars. Just a struggling single mother trying to survive. Ethan looked back toward the road ahead. The more he learned about Emily Carter, the less he believed she was guilty. And the more he learned about Kyle Peterson, the more convinced he became that the truth had not even begun to surface. The next morning arrived far too quickly. Pale sunlight filtered through the thin curtains of Emily's apartment as she stood in the kitchen preparing oatmeal for Noah. His fever had dropped during the night, but not enough for school. He sat at the table wrapped in his favorite blue blanket, quietly drawing dinosaurs on a sheet of notebook paper. The scene should have felt ordinary. Instead, uncertainty lingered over everything. Emily checked her phone again. Still no message from Willow and Stone. No suspension notice. No termination paperwork. No explanation. Just silence. She hated silence. At least bad news was clear. Silence left room for fear. "Are you going to work today?" Noah asked. Emily stirred the oatmeal and forced a smile. "I am not sure yet." Noah looked up from his drawing. "You always know." The innocent observation made her laugh softly. Not always. Across the city, Ethan Brooks entered the corporate headquarters of Northwest Dining Group before most employees had arrived. The lobby remained quiet except for the distant hum of cleaning equipment. He carried a paper folder instead of his usual tablet. Inside were copies of everything collected during the past 18 hours. Employee statements, security logs, financial reports, maintenance records. Individually, none of them proved anything. Together, they painted a troubling picture. Ethan stepped into a conference room and spread the documents across the polished table. One detail continued bothering him: the missing cash itself. According to Kyle's report, the envelope belonged to a private client who had paid a vendor deposit. Yet the accounting records showed no scheduled vendor payment that day. Ethan checked the report again. Then again. The discrepancy remained. He picked up the phone. "Connect me with accounting." Meanwhile, at Willow and Stone, Kyle Peterson arrived earlier than usual. He moved through the restaurant with visible confidence, greeting employees and reviewing schedules as though nothing unusual had happened. Yet beneath the surface, tension lingered. Staff conversations stopped whenever he approached. Marcus noticed it. Jenna noticed it. Even customers seemed to sense something felt off. Around 10 o'clock, Frank entered through the back door carrying his lunch cooler. The elderly dishwasher had spent most of the night thinking about what he witnessed near the lockers. The memory refused to leave him alone. He had spent decades teaching his grandchildren that character mattered more than convenience. If he stayed silent now, what did that say about his own character? Before starting his shift, he made a decision. Back at the apartment, Emily finally received a notification. Her heart jumped. She immediately opened the message. The sender was not management. It was Jenna. Emily read the text twice. Then a third time. "We miss you. Most of us do not believe the story. Hang in there." Emily stared at the screen. The words were simple, yet they meant more than Jenna probably realized. For the first time since yesterday, she felt something she had not experienced in hours. Hope. At corporate headquarters, Ethan listened carefully as the accounting manager reviewed financial records. There was no vendor deposit scheduled yesterday, she confirmed. Ethan remained silent for several seconds. None. I checked twice. Ethan thanked her and ended the call. Then he opened Kyle's original incident report. The foundation of the accusation had just developed. A major crack. A slow breath escaped his lungs. The truth was getting closer. Much closer. At that same moment, Frank walked into the office of the Regional Human Resources Director carrying a handwritten statement. His hands trembled slightly from age, but his voice remained steady. "I need to report something," he said. The director looked up. "What kind of something?" Frank placed the statement on the desk. "The kind that could save an innocent person's job." By late afternoon, events that had been moving separately began quietly converging toward the same destination. Emily sat at her kitchen table, helping Noah color a picture of a lighthouse while her laptop remained open beside an unfinished resume. The apartment felt calmer than it had the day before. Noah's fever continued dropping. The medicine was working, yet every few minutes her eyes drifted toward her phone. She told herself she was not waiting for a message from the restaurant. She was. Deep down, she knew she was. Across the city, a special meeting was being assembled inside a conference room at Northwest Dining Group headquarters. Regional managers arrived first. Human resources representatives followed. Then came members of the compliance department. Nobody knew exactly why the meeting had been called with such urgency, only that the company's founder would be attending personally. That fact alone was enough to make people nervous. Ethan Brooks stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows reviewing the latest findings. The picture was no longer blurry. It was becoming painfully clear. Frank's written statement matched security records. The accounting discrepancies matched the investigator's report. Even more concerning, additional interviews revealed that Kyle had recently received warnings regarding employee treatment. Individually, each issue might have been explained away. Together, they formed a pattern. Ethan closed the folder and looked around the room. "Bring in the branch reports." 20 minutes later, Kyle Peterson walked into the conference room carrying the confidence of a man who believed he was attending a routine management review. That confidence lasted exactly 3 seconds. His eyes widened as he recognized the people seated around the table. Human resources, compliance, regional leadership. Then his gaze landed on Ethan Brooks. The color drained from his face. Like many managers, Kyle had seen photographs of the company's founder, but he had never met him in person. Ethan remained calm. "Please have a seat." Back at the apartment, Emily's phone finally buzzed. Her heart immediately accelerated. She reached for it. An unfamiliar number appeared on the screen. For a moment, she considered ignoring it. Then she answered. "Hello, Miss Carter." The voice sounded professional. "This is Rachel Simmons from Northwest Dining Group, Human Resources." Emily sat up straighter. "Yes. We would like to invite you to attend a meeting tomorrow morning regarding the incident at Willow and Stone." Emily's stomach tightened. "Am I being terminated?" A brief pause followed. "No, Miss Carter. You are not." Emily closed her eyes. Relief washed through her, so suddenly, she almost felt dizzy. "Then why am I being asked to come in?" Rachel's tone softened slightly. "Because new information has come to light." After the call ended, Emily remained motionless. New information. The words echoed inside her mind. For the first time since the accusation, she sensed the direction of the story changing. Meanwhile, inside the conference room, Ethan slid a file across the table. Kyle opened it. His expression shifted with every page. Security logs, witness statements, accounting reports, maintenance records, Facts. Quiet, undeniable facts. Nobody raised their voice. Nobody needed to. The evidence spoke clearly enough. Ethan folded his hands. There is one question I have been asking since yesterday. Kyle stared at the documents without responding. Ethan's voice remained steady. Who benefits? Silence filled the room. Long and uncomfortable. Because everyone already knew the answer. Hundreds of miles of restaurant operations depended on trust. Customers trusted employees. Employees trusted managers. Managers trusted leadership. The moment trust disappeared, everything else began to collapse. Ethan glanced toward the window where the Seattle skyline stretched beneath the evening sun. Then he returned his attention to the room. The investigation was no longer about missing money. It was about something much bigger. It was about restoring the truth before an innocent person paid the price for someone else's decisions. And for the first time since this began, the truth was finally within reach. The following morning, a light mist hung over Seattle as Emily parked outside the Northwest Dining Group headquarters. The glass building rose above the surrounding streets like something from another world. She sat in her car for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. Noah was staying with her elderly neighbor for the morning, and although his fever had finally broken, worry still lingered in the back of her mind. Everything felt uncertain. The only thing she knew for sure was that someone wanted to speak with her. As she stepped into the lobby, polished marble floors reflected the morning sunlight. Employees moved confidently through security gates while conversations echoed softly through the vast space. Emily felt completely out of place. Her best blouse was neatly pressed, but it suddenly seemed ordinary compared to the tailored suits surrounding her. A receptionist greeted her with a warm smile. "Miss Carter, they are expecting you." Moments later, she found herself standing outside a large conference room. Through the glass walls, she could see several executives seated around a long table. Her stomach tightened. Then the door opened. Rachel Simmons greeted her and motioned for her to enter. The room fell quiet as Emily stepped inside. She immediately recognized Kyle seated at the far end of the table. The confidence he usually carried was gone. His shoulders seemed heavier. His eyes remained fixed on the documents in front of him. Emily sat carefully, unsure what was about to happen. Then another door opened. The room rose to its feet. Emily turned toward the entrance and froze. The quiet customer from Willow and Stone walked into the room. The same man who had sat alone drinking coffee. The same man who had watched everything unfold without saying a word. He moved toward the head of the table. Rachel spoke first. "Miss Carter, I would like to introduce Ethan Brooks, founder and chief executive officer of Northwest Dining Group." Emily felt the air leave her lungs. For several seconds, she could not process what she had heard. Ethan offered a calm nod before taking his seat. "Thank you for coming today." His voice was exactly as she remembered. Steady, measured, professional. Ethan opened a folder. "Over the past 48 hours, we conducted a complete review of the incident at Willow and Stone." Nobody spoke. "The investigation determined that the accusations against you were unsupported by evidence." Emily stared at him. The words sounded distant, almost unreal. Ethan continued. "The reported vendor payment did not exist. Security records revealed inconsistencies in the timeline. Witness statements raised additional concerns. Most importantly, there is no credible evidence linking you to any wrongdoing." Relief flooded through her so quickly she nearly forgot to breathe. Her eyes filled with tears she had spent days holding back. Not because she wanted sympathy, because the weight she had been carrying was finally beginning to lift. Ethan turned several pages. Multiple findings also revealed serious failures in leadership and professional conduct. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. The facts spoke clearly enough. Around the table, executives reviewed documents quietly. Human resources representatives exchanged notes. The outcome was obvious. Kyle lowered his head. For the first time since this nightmare began, Emily no longer looked like the person under investigation. Ethan closed the folder and looked directly at her. "Miss Carter, on behalf of this company, I owe you an apology." The room remained completely silent. "You were placed in an unfair position. You were not treated with the respect every employee deserves." Emily blinked rapidly. She had expected clarification, maybe reinstatement. She had never expected this. Ethan's expression softened slightly. "You showed remarkable dignity under difficult circumstances. For the first time since entering the building, Emily felt something she had almost forgotten existed. She felt seen, truly seen. And although the meeting was not over, everyone in the room could already sense it. The truth had finally arrived, and it had changed everything. 3 months later, the first signs of autumn colored the trees outside Northwest Dining Group headquarters. The morning air carried a crisp chill, and sunlight reflected off the glass building as employees arrived for work. Inside, Emily Carter walked through the lobby with a confidence she never imagined she would possess. Life still was not perfect. Bills still existed. Responsibilities still filled every day. But something fundamental had changed. She no longer woke up afraid that one mistake or one accusation could erase everything she had built. Following the investigation, Emily had accepted a new position within the company's employee relations department. At first she hesitated. She had never worked in a corporate office. She had never sat in meetings or reviewed workplace policies. Yet Ethan Brooks had seen something in her that others had overlooked. Not experience, not credentials, character. The qualities that helped her survive difficult years had become strengths in an entirely different environment. Now she spent her days helping create programs that supported employees facing family challenges, medical emergencies, and financial hardships. Every recommendation she made came from experience rather than theory. She understood what it felt like to struggle silently. She understood what it meant when a single act of kindness arrived at exactly the right moment. Downstairs, a small event was taking place in the company auditorium. Managers from restaurants across the region had gathered for a leadership conference. Emily stood near the back reviewing notes when Ethan stepped onto the stage. The room immediately grew quiet. He looked around at hundreds of employees before speaking. A company is not defined by its buildings, its profits, or its reputation, he said. It is defined by how people treat each other when nobody important appears to be watching. Emily felt a small smile form. Those words carried a meaning only a few people in the room fully understood. Ethan continued, "Respect is not something employees earn. It is something they deserve from the moment they walk through our doors." The audience applauded. Some managers nodded thoughtfully. Others scribbled notes. But for Emily, the speech felt deeply personal. Because she knew those values were no longer just words printed in a handbook. They had become action. Later that afternoon, Emily left work early and drove to Noah's elementary school. Children poured from the building carrying backpacks and artwork. Noah spotted her immediately and ran across the sidewalk with a grin. "Mom." Emily laughed as he wrapped his arms around her. "How was school?" "Guess what?" His eyes sparkled with excitement. "I got picked for the science fair." "That is amazing." Noah beamed proudly. As they walked toward the car, he glanced up at her. "You smile more now." Emily stopped for a moment. The observation caught her off guard. Children noticed everything. "Do I?" Noah nodded. "A lot more." Emily squeezed his hand gently. "I think that is because things are getting better." That evening, after dropping Noah off at soccer practice, she received a message from Ethan. It was simple. "Congratulations on the Employee Support Program approval. Great work." Emily smiled and typed back a thank you. Then she looked across the field where Noah laughed with teammates beneath the setting sun. For years she had believed strength meant carrying every burden alone. She understood differently now. Real strength sometimes meant continuing forward when life felt unfair. It meant protecting kindness even when others did not deserve it. It meant refusing to let hardship change who you were. The accusation that once threatened to destroy her future had ultimately revealed something far more valuable: the truth. And in the end, the truth had not simply restored her job. It had restored her hope. Because sometimes life changes not when powerful people rescue you, but when they finally recognize the value that was there all along. And as the golden light settled across the soccer field, Emily realized something she had not felt in a very long time. She was no longer just surviving. She was finally building a future.